Really? Did you really say that?
Looking at my mom and dad, I was like, what's going on? Like, do you have something to tell me?
At 34, I've never had this conversation with another gay male before.
And that's an exhausting experience that straight people do not have to go through. And so I think questioning them and their response to how we come out to them is a fabulous place to get them to think about what we might have to go through as queer people.
It gives me such like Bruno Mars vibes. And he's like, he really does without the gambling addiction problem. You can't just listen to what everyone says online, right? Or else we'd all be fucked. Welcome to Unshut, a place where if at any point you feel like you need to shut the up, don't.
I am here. I'm ready. I don't know if this lighting is working or if this setup is good. Let me know if I need to change anything.
No, the setup looks good. Can you hear me just fine?
I can hear you just fine.
Awesome. I love your hair.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I literally just so I like you did not ask, but I'm just gonna share. Like my hair has never been curly. It's like a more recent sort of addition, and I think like it's because I switched up my like shampoo conditioning schedule. So thank you though.
Wait, so you don't naturally have curly hair?
No, everyone in my family has like straight hair. And so when my hair started to curl up like late last year, I was looking at my mom and dad. I was like, what's going on? Like, do you have something to tell me? And I think it's just like something that might happen. Maybe it's the change in water. It might be the change in hair product, but
Very interesting. I love it. I just love curly hair. Mine's super wavy. My sister, my siblings, they have curly hair. Well, not all of them, but most of them. And so I'm like a big fan of curly hair.
I love curly hair as well. You're saying your hair is it long and wavy or it's just wavy in general?
Mine kind of looks like the way yours looks right now. It can get really curly depending on humidity, but it is pretty curly.
The upkeep is so important, right? I feel like it's so hard, frankly, and like sometimes the shower is an absolute mess, but I feel like it's worth it. I'm enjoying having curly hair.
I love it. Well, how's your day been so far?
Pretty good, pretty relaxed. My boyfriend is coming into town tomorrow, so it's just been kind of like prepping for that and just in general, actually, you know what? It's been fantastic because I got back all of the official mixes and masters for my upcoming project last night. So I was listening through it this morning and I think I'm going to submit it later tonight. So
Oh, nice. Is that like a really fast process for you or like,
album wise, longest project. Like this is my fourth project, but I would say the stuff that is on this album I started writing it back in 2019, which is crazy to think about. But from a mixing mastering perspective, we kind of have been working on it solidly from like October or November. And then we sat down for like a proper let's just all get together and make edit session in like February. And so then I was like, I need it, guys, by the end of March because, you know, with like an independent artist submitting music to distribution service, you want to give at least 4 to 5 weeks in case there's any hijinks on the way.
yeah, and that's the most fascinating part about me talking to independent artists or just artists in general. I never really put thought, and obviously, like, I'm not a songwriter, I'm not a singer, right? So, how would I know, right? But that's been one of the most fascinating things about learning about musicians like you is how long you sit on a project or how long something has been in the works. So, you said some of the stuff you've been writing since 2019. Some have said it's like therapeutic. What's it like for you going back to, let's say, even 2019, pre-pandemic, pre-everything, and now looking back at some of your art from 2019 to where you're at today?
That's a great question. I think that for me, well, it's kind of an interesting journey because yes, it's very therapeutic, but for me, I came out as gay in 2021. And so some of these songs were written when I was still in the closet. So it was almost like important to go back in time and restructure, but also it's so funny. I've seen this countless times with different artists and I definitely fall victim to it myself. When you're writing, and especially if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, especially if you're writing kind of on your own or maybe with max two or three other songwriters, you end up kind of unleashing your like subconscious or unconscious thoughts into the music. So there's been so many times I will go back and listen to a song that I put out on my first album back in 2020 or old demos from like 2017, 18, 19. And I'm just like, I may not have been out publicly or even out to myself, but part of me always knew. And you can hear it in the songwriting. And I think that's just the most beautiful thing because now, as someone who is more confident and secure in their identity and sexuality, I can take those lyrics and present them in a super confident and different way than I would have if I had released it back in 2019.
That is so beautiful. And like, and to hear you say going back into that and seeing how like there were some parts of you that obviously, I mean, it's who you are, right? And I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that being in the closet or not being out also you're not authentically you, right? It's truly just a part of you that's not out, right? And so I think revisiting that the way you just explained it is so beautiful. Can we touch on that a little bit, or is that too personal?
Absolutely. No, we can talk about anything.
Which I feel so moved by you because I don't usually ask permission. Usually I'm like all guns out. I'm like, I don't give a shit, you know?
Yeah.
So
No, I love that. I love that.
going back to what you were writing
Mhm.
before you were out, were you dating women at the time?
So that's so funny that you asked that. Like, I never publicly talked about like dating a woman or having a relationship in that sense. And I think it's like I said, because part of me always had this idea that like this is a struggle that I'm going through on my own. And while it's not something that's vindictive or supposed to be, I'm preying on the downfall of whoever I'm with, it almost felt wrong to put a solid label on something like that when I was so unsure of where I stood on things. And so I haven't ever like formally dated a woman. And actually, my only experience with dating women, you could say, was actually in a very uncomfortable, almost like grooming type situation because I was 17 at the time that I was in a relationship with someone who was 22 or 23. And that doesn't seem like such a stark difference. But for me, when I reached 22 or 23, I was sitting there and I was like, the idea of dating anybody, let alone someone 19, 20 even, it was just disgusting to me personally. And so to kind of tie it back into what you were asking, how I wrote about love back then or romance was in a much more tragic, sad, depressed, angsty kind of way. Very hopeless. Hopeless is definitely the word. Because now, as I write music, as somebody who is out, who is truly in love with somebody, like it's so different and the contrast is so stark.
What prompted the coming out side of you? Like, what inspired you to truly take that leap and accept who you were as a person? That's something I'm very curious about because what's truly true to our journeys is that our self discoveries really, you can't predict them. They really are that unique, you know? So, what prompted you to accept who you were, or what prompted you to take the leap in seeing men differently?
It's a great question. And I say that because I never planned my coming out. I think it was more of a heat of the moment sort of thing. I was getting to a place with my family. I always grew up playing sort of the family therapist, like wanting to speak to anybody who felt like they were misunderstood, clearly for reasons we know why now. But as I was speaking to my family one day, I remember I initially had come out as bisexual, coming from an immigrant Asian family. That was not something that was accepted. They didn't see it coming. They took it very poorly. And me being at the time more of a people pleaser and a parent pleaser specifically, absolutely took that in the worst way and decided, you know what? Never mind. And the next morning, I came to my parents and I said, actually, I'm straight. I don't know what I was thinking. And I went back into the closet for 6 months. In April 2021, I remember the environment at home, as you can imagine, was very tense because everybody knew there was an unfinished conversation here. I remember saying one day to my parents, like, I would never make my children feel like they had to come out or be, or like owed me any sort of explanation on their identity. I would love them for who they were. And I think my mom at that point looked at me and was like, okay, is this about your kids or is this about you? Because we've always felt like there's still unfinished dialogue here. And so I took that opportunity. But the scariest thing is, I don't know if I hadn't been prompted, if I would have ever actually allowed myself to fully explore this part of myself, which is scary because there could be so many other people out there in my shoes. But I'm so grateful to have an amazing support system. My family has really come around, my friends have come around, my loved ones. And so it's been great, but there was no plan, which is kind of almost a scarier answer.
Absolutely. Were you able to understand your parents during those 6 months, right? So, understanding the fact that they come from a completely different culture, they come from a completely different background. At the time, were you able to understand that, or is that something you also came around to?
I think it was more about less of understanding where they were coming from and more about just not wanting to put in the effort to have to explain myself or fight for my right to be who I want to be, just because it felt like, oh, I shouldn't have to do that with my family. Like, I accept everything about them hands down. And if any of the tables were to turn, I knew I could take a few seconds and then come around. So I don't understand why it doesn't go both ways. It felt like love was very conditional at that time. And I think I always wanted more of my parents, like coming from an immigrant background myself. And like, I know I would bond with some of my other like minority friends where we would have shared experience on things that we wouldn't talk to our parents about. But it was never something that I was prideful or something that I enjoyed bonding over. In fact, I was always jealous of the people that could go and speak to their families about anything because I saw just how much more overtly happy they seemed. And so I think I held my parents to that higher standard, and I'm glad I did because it's helped so much to this day.
When I think that's so beautiful too, because I think that like I know for with my personal experience was I was able to understand like my mom's exposure was never really there. She came from a very strict religious home. I think that at the time I was almost a little bit more gracious with her than she was with me. But I do think that having that understanding is something that's so monumental to our future relationships with the people who reject us when we first come out. Because my mom and I are like, she's my best friend, she's my ride or die, she is my life now. And it's not that she wasn't then, but there was that disconnect for those months of, her not understanding that lifestyle. And I'm actually curious to ask you this, hearing you talk about immigrant families, do you think that we are a little bit more gracious than others because we understand rejection? We're introduced to rejection a lot sooner than most people. For example, me being a Hispanic, didn't know English, being brown, I looked different than most people when we first came to the US. That understanding also kind of gives us a little bit more grace when we do decide to come out as gay or bisexual. Do you relate to that at all?
I absolutely agree. And I feel like that's something that I tackled a lot on my last project. This idea of like coming out being almost a fairy tale ending, because it should be, because it's such a process to get to that point that you're almost like, all right, I want to breathe thereafter. But the number of queer people that I would interact with, specifically minority queer people, that would tell me like, oh, it is hard out here. Good luck. Like if you don't fit the stereotypical white, skinny build, you're kind of done for when it comes to the idea of romance. And for me, as somebody that took so long to come out, I knew that I wanted to have the same experience as anybody who was gay in high school. I would have loved to have like my first boyfriends, like my flings and all of that stuff. But I think because my mind was maturing at the same time as I was processing my sexuality, I came out ready for a long-term relationship. And I knew that the number of times, because I came out when I was in a bigger body, I remember that I got so much flack from people that I would go on dates with telling me, oh, that's not something that's for you. I wouldn't mind, having a one night stand or hooking up, but the idea of actually dating you and taking you out in public and romance and stuff like that, like maybe if you lost some weight. And I know that, again, that's something that's big in the immigrant mindset as well. Like we do have a lot of pressure to look a certain way to stand out because life is already hard enough for us that it's like adding on other layers can make it even more difficult. And that's not right. It shouldn't be that way. But sometimes these things just are societally constructed and we have to do our best to adapt and live that way. It's not like we set the rules, right? So I totally understand where you're coming from.
This is probably the most refreshing part about like I'm covered in goosebumps right now because I was not expecting this to even be a topic. And obviously we'll talk about your music right now. I'm super excited to do that as well. It's so refreshing to me because I'm 34, I'll be 35 this year. And at 34, I've never had this conversation with another gay male before, other than my partner. So I think outside of my relationship and outside of my family relationships, you're truly the first person I've ever had this conversation with. And it's so refreshing to hear that you two can relate to that. And it's not a generational thing. It truly is a cultural thing. It's a lifestyle thing. So thank you for being so open about that. I think that as a 34-year-old, you truly have brought me perspective, and it's such a beautiful thing to be able to experience it. And I hope everyone that listens can find peace and comfort in this conversation too.
Absolutely. I know that being able to bond over this sort of thing, it's nice to know that you're not alone in your experience. And unfortunately, it's just something that like non-minority members of the queer community just probably won't be able to understand. They can sympathize, but the trauma that comes with having to accept yourself and being subjected to yet another closed off space after just jumping out of the closet, it's unreal.
So unreal. And so now I'm also curious about like, now I'm also thinking about this with you as an artist. Not
Mhm.
only did you experience what it was like to come out sexuality wise, right? You've also faced a lot of adversity that comes with just having a certain skin color, right? Not even talking where you're from, culture, anything like that, just truly what you look like. But what was your experience like going to your family or even your friends and telling them you're going to be putting out music?
Hmm. Music has always been a part of my life, like since I was a little kid. And so my family always knew how important it was to me. I think my relationship with it changed when I started to write and when I started to work on original music, because then music became more of a journal and a place for me to be introspective with myself. And so I think a lot of times my friends and family and loved ones, period, who would listen to my music would say things like, oh, it's very raw, it's very vulnerable. It's almost like you take these very core experiences and you don't really edit them as much. You just make them lyrically adept so that way people can appreciate it who don't know what you're going through. But for any of us that are close to you and understand, we know exactly what you were going through when you wrote that song. And I'm actually going to expound on that with a song that I put out just a month ago called So Happy You Knew, that is on this upcoming project, because it kind of ties together what we're talking about when it comes to the process of coming out, being queer, and being in spaces where you feel like you're already taking up too much space. That song was actually about an individual that I met back in 2021 after coming out. He was 13 years old. He was Indian, just like me. He was gay, just like me. And I was so happy that he was able to come out to a supportive and loving family. And I was like, it's amazing. You have your whole life ahead of you. You're only 13 years old. You know who you are. That's great. But he was just such an old soul. And if you're queer and you're a minority, you are not foreign to that term. It's what people are using to describe just how much trauma you've been through. You are so tired because of how much trauma you have been through. And so sometimes when I was speaking to my 13-year-old friend, it almost felt like I was talking to somebody who was 65 or 70 years old because of how much he felt like he had to endure. And that's not something that you want to experience when you're speaking to a middle schooler. And so he did ultimately actually end up taking his life, unfortunately. And that's what inspired me not only to like live my life to the fullest and not be afraid of taking up space, but also to hold everybody to a higher standard. I don't want to just know that you accept me. How you're reacting to me being vulnerable with you is so important to me. I know that if you come out, anybody that's come out has definitely experienced at least one person telling them, we've always known. I mean, we're happy that you figured it out for yourself now, but we've always known. And that to me always rubbed me the wrong way, because I know that it's a privilege to be able to sit here and have loved ones accept me for who I am, because some people don't even have that. But I think that as I have that privilege, I want to use my platform to sort of get people who don't have to come out to critically think about the hoops that queer people have to jump through in order to come out over and over and over again, because it doesn't just end with your family. You do it in the workplace, you do it with your friends, you do it with your loved ones. And that's an exhausting experience that straight people do not have to go through. And so I think questioning them and their response to how we come out to them is a fabulous place to get them to think about what we might have to go through as queer people.
I'm again 34 and I've never even thought about that perspective, because when I heard you say the term old soul, I'm like, so relatable, but I've never looked at it in that angle. And I think this is why these open conversations are so important to have, because it brings a different level of understanding, and it may not even be understanding to others, but it's to yourself. And I think that even you're providing me this, I'm like, fuck, like this is like a therapy session for me right now. I'm like, oh my gosh,
I
you
love it.
know?
I love it.
By the way, that's a great song. And just a day or so ago, I was in the car and I'm showing my partner your music. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to talk to him. I'm super excited. I loved his enthusiasm. Anyone can be a singer-songwriter, but to be able to find an artist that stands out for so many different reasons is so, so refreshing to find in this day of age, right? So I'm showing him your music and we were listening to Uglies. And I paused it and I'm like, oh my gosh, so what do you think? He's like, I fucking love it. I'm like, isn't it so fucking good? And so I told him, I was like, and some of his other stuff also, he gives me such like Bruno Mars vibes. And he's like, he really does, without the gambling addiction problem.
Yes, yes.
I had to share that with you because,
Oh,
I do get very giddy right before I do these interviews. And I'm showing my partner your music. And so I don't think people understand that it's more than an interview. Here we are talking about substantial conversations, but it's also, I'm sharing your music with someone that I truly love. I'm sharing it with my family, with my friends. It creates a more personal and unique bonding experience. So yeah, I had to share that with you.
absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I love hearing that. I love the comparison as well. That's like a huge honor because Bruno Mars is someone I've looked up to forever. And again, so grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak with you.
Oh my gosh, likewise, dude. It's very important for me to stay also very authentic to my platform and to what it is that I'm doing, right? You are the first person that has hit me up on Instagram that I've actually agreed to sit down and talk to. I get inquiries all the time. I created this strict rule with myself where I'm like, no, I refuse to create a platform that's open to everyone. It needs to be selective and it needs to be truly an authentic connection. And but there was just something about you. I don't even need to know his music. I need to know who he is.
Absolutely. I appreciate, like I said, I really appreciate you giving me the time to be able to speak with you about this. It's already been such a great conversation.
No, absolutely. And before we even jump into more music,
Yeah.
I have to ask you, how do you know Morgan? Because that was also a big factor for me that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've made jokes about this on the pod before. I'm such a down bitch for anyone I connect with. So if you support them and I support you, I'll support them too, because it's not just about supporting them, it's about supporting the people that supported me and likewise, whatever. It's a huge connection, right? How do you know her?
Yes, so we don't officially actually know each other. It's definitely one of the more like social media connections. We have a lot of artist friends in common and we've collaborated with similar people. And so I know I came across her music a few years ago, like on TikTok, like 2020, 2021, and I just loved her sound so much. And so I reached out. We haven't collaborated yet, but we've been talking about making music. And like I said, it's mostly just like she's a friend of a friend, but we run in such a close circle that it's like we definitely are aware of each other and we know each other. And so actually, it was through her sit down with you that I was able to say, okay, great. Like that's definitely somebody that I would like to reach out to and speak to.
Oh, I love that so much. And those connections are so, so important, who you align yourself. And obviously we sometimes have like, our judgment is not always the best. We don't always make the best connections with people, but I do think that the universe has a very clever way of giving us those little goosebump feelings that make us pursue our actions. So, but something I wanted to talk with you was in some of your lyrics, you are very blunt. Who in your family or who in your circle is more likely to not necessarily slap you on the wrist, but to be like, really? Did you really say that?
uh I think that my mom is definitely the most reactive person. Like, not necessarily in a like, why did you say that? Or but more of like a, oh my gosh, like she'll just be kind of like taken aback at the fact that like that exists. But that like I like that. I really enjoy those reactions. I love like pushing the envelope in that way. And it's not in an intentional way, if that makes sense. Like I'm not doing it specifically to stand out. I grew up listening to musicians that did the same thing, especially from like a rap and hip hop perspective. I always loved rappers that don't take themselves too seriously. Not because they're not good musicians, but just because they allow themselves to be more creative and cartoony with their craft. And I think that's just what inspired me as well. So if I've got a line in a song that people are not expecting and they react to in sort of like a, oh my gosh, you did not just say that kind of way, then I'm like, all right, that line is definitely cemented and staying in there.
No, you definitely have a few, and you have a very awesome way of doing it. But I do also want to talk about your rap and hip hop influence because I think that something that was also just another big hit factor for me was your infusion, the way you are infusing hip hop with pop, with rap, with even just your culture. I am just like, again, it's that breath of fresh air. So let's talk about that. Like, how did you find your sound? At what point did you want to infuse all of the above, the pop, the rap, the hip hop, the cultural part of you? And obviously now we're also tapping into sexuality, right? So how did we get there?
So pop music has always been like a huge inspiration for me. I grew up listening to the radio, but also I was trained in Indian classical music growing up. And so those roots were already infused. And I would always come home from like choir practice or a cappella practice and talk to my grandmother, who was my teacher, and kind of ask her like, hey, there's this pop song. So I remember we did like little cool Indian fusions of songs like Rolling in the Deep by Adele, Royals by Lorde, like Radioactive, Imagine Dragons. And I would come back and ask her like, the Indian scale is very similar to the American scale, where American or Western scale has do re mi, we have sa re ga, and it's like literally the same kind of notes. However, it's a little bit more nuanced with the Indian scale because our sharps and flats are a lot more extensive. Like the riffing that happens in Indian music is a lot deeper than what would happen in Western music, which is why going from Indian music to English music is almost easier in that sense. And so I guess it just subconsciously, I think like manifested into my original music. I was a little bit less overt about it in my initial initial songs where I would have the harmonies or like riffing in the background that was very like inspired by my Indian roots. Uglies is the first and only time, frankly, that I've taken that creative risk to really throw in a language change and really delve into the cultural part of it, almost as a gag, because to talk about taking up space, right? And almost what you need to do as somebody who might stand out in a different way or a not stereotypical way. And as an independent artist, you have to think constantly about how can I market myself to almost get people to want to be interested in listening. So I figured if I could bait people with an Uglies type song and be like, hey, look, he's doing like fusion music and he's celebrating his Indian culture, then they could come to my actual project and find that it's a lot more R&B heavy and vocal heavy, and I don't just make that kind of music. And so Uglies is almost like, I feel about Uglies how Doja Cat would feel about Say So, or Lizzo would feel about Truth Hurts, where it's like, it's that banger, it's definitely what gets your name out there, but you as an artist then have to step up and be like, all right, here's what else I can do now that I've got your attention.
Incredible. Like, I love being able to tap into the strategy behind an artist, because I think that anyone can just go and record a song. Anyone can be produced. Anyone can do vocal training, but the artistry behind it is so far more. And I love that that is how you view what you're doing, because it's translating so well. I love everything about it. And so another quick question, just totally random off of the top of my head. In the podcasting world, we have an analytics page, right? So we can see what country is streaming and how many streams it's, or what percentage of streams is hitting in these countries, right? As a musical artist, do you guys have the same access to be able to see like where it's being streamed?
Yes, mostly on Spotify, I want to say. I think Apple Music is a little bit less user interface friendly, but Spotify for Artists, that app allows us to look at streams and see where they're coming from, what countries, what states. And I look forward to the Spotify Wrapped each year because I'm able to see where my music was streamed the most. And it helps because it's always in such unexpected places. Like for me, I try to not get too tied up to the numbers because it definitely always feel like comparison is the thief of joy. And so I try not to get too involved with that, but it's still like always unbelievable to me to feel like, oh wow, there's somebody out in like Uruguay that's like relating to what I'm going through enough to go and listen to the song, which is always so cool.
Yeah. Have you had a lot of streams in India?
Yes, I do get a decent number of Indian streams. I think the issue there is where you bring in sexuality. I definitely feel like if I was a straight Indian male artist, my success there would be a lot stronger. I just know that it's because, like I say, I love to push the creative envelope. I strongly believe that there is a lack of like star power in the male pop industry. We have incredibly unrealistic high standards for women, but we don't subject ourselves to any of that. And I don't buy into that. I hate that. And so I try to push myself in that way artistically. I'm like, okay, we're going to have dance sequences. We're going to have costume changes. We're going to play with makeup. We're going to play with different looks. And we're really going to go there, and not in a let's just stand out kind of way. But let's, if we're going to make all these comments about what female pop vocalists and artists should be doing differently, we should be able to hold ourselves to the same standard.
And I love hearing you say that. You're absolutely right. There is this high expectation and standard when it comes to someone like, let's say, even Tate McRae. She's serving a lot of stuff that hasn't really been done in so long in regards to the dance numbers, the dance breaks, the remixes, right? But you're absolutely right when it comes to a male artist or a male pop artist. Why aren't we expecting that out of them? And I think that that is where, once again, we're tapping into true artistry, because now you're not just an Indian artist. You're not just an American Indian artist. You're not just an LGBTQ artist. You are just an artist. And you're absolutely right. We need just an artist.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I could have said it better myself. I feel like it is so important. And it unfortunately sucks because you almost have to find a way to look at yourself as a product. And that's the weirdest thing to do. Like, how do I commodify myself and all of this different intersectionality into something that is palatable to somebody who has no clue what it's like to be intersectional? And it's almost like I've given up on that. I like, if it happens, great. But this idea of like mainstream success and Grammys, like I do want all of that. But I think like in terms of a legacy, I'm much more interested in impacting people. So if there's like a queer Indian kid out there that will come up and be like, hey, I listened to your song, I love it, I relate to it, my job is done, because I didn't have that growing growing up and I wanted that representation so badly. If it could be on a mainstream level, great, why not? I'd never turn that down. But if it's not, I'm not going to deny the impact that the music has had.
Absolutely. You posted a picture where I believe you're holding a mic, you've got the nails. You know what foot I'm talking about? That level of release. I want to talk about that feeling with you because I think to me, when I saw that photo, it was so empowering. To me, it represented an artist showing up as they are. And again, we need more of. When you hit upload, what is that release? What is that feeling knowing that that just went into the world? That image that you're portraying just went out into the world?
It's a good question. I almost have to not think about it as it being as big a thing as it is, because when I do, it almost puts pressure on, okay, why aren't people responding in that way? And like, there's plenty of people who are responding in the way I expect them to. It's just with that positivity, there is also so much negativity. And it's so rooted in this idea like, okay, I don't have the ability to do what you're doing. I don't have that freedom. So I'm going to try to find a way to tear you down for what you have so you don't feel as free to post. And so I try to think less about that. I just know, like, for me, again, it is so much more about pushing myself to have the same standards that I expect of other people. I feel like that's the only fair way to do it. I never want to be a boring performer. I always want the microphone to be on. I'm working harder now on like incorporating choreography and stuff into my sets. I want to be more intentional with my style. I would love to be a more well-rounded artist altogether and not just focus on the music, because when I was straight, I knew that all I needed to, I was so uncomfortable. There's actually, I love that you brought up the picture with the microphone and the nails, because for a while I would stand there and just be stagnant in front of the microphone and realize, okay, there's a lot more pressure on the vocals because this is all I know how to do without giving myself away. I don't want to be seen. Now I so badly want to be seen and taken seriously and be loud and proud that I realize the vocals are one part of it, but everything else that builds that picture is just as important.
So, and you also just talked about, you want more movement, you want to incorporate more choreography, right? Going back to pre-discovering that you wanted more of that, what is something today that you could think that even though you are incorporating all of those elements, right? What is something you still feel that you are lacking that you could still continue to work on?
I think I could definitely learn how to be more comfortable in my body and in my skin. I think that that's a process that's lifelong and ongoing. And I think that comes with being like risk taking. And I think I'm going to tie it together with like style decisions. I want to be a lot more confident with the fashion that I bring on, because the person that I worked with Uglies on to create the video for Uglies, I was in such a safe space. I was like, okay, I think I want to do street style. I want to do fast fashion, whatever. And I remember my friend slash director was saying, this is great. And I love the outfits you're choosing, but I need you to remember the fact that like, you're not dressing up to go to the mall. And that was such a read, but it was so necessary, because it was like, when I look back at Uglies now, I can think of clear, iconic fashion moments that were presented that would have never seen the light of day had I not been willing to take a creative risk. And I really want to bring those moments to the stage and in my performances and stuff. So that way, for people that don't know who I am, I can leave an impact, and maybe then they'll go back and check out my work.
No, I love that so much, because being self-aware in anything that you do in life, I think is so important. And I also think that one, being open to criticism is so good, but knowing who you're taking the criticism from and their delivery is also so important. You can't just listen to what everyone says online, right? Or else we'd all be fucked. Because you're absolutely right. Battling that comfort in your own skin will probably be an ongoing part of you forever. But I will leave you with this. When it comes to that, you have to get to a point in life where you have to realize that everything that you don't like about you will one day be the things that people love the most about. When it comes to freckles, when it comes to hair, when it comes to teeth, when it comes to eyes, when it comes to all of these things that we consider imperfections of ourselves, your weight, your feet, your hands, someone out there will fall in love with those things you hate about you the most.
I love that sentiment. That is actually exactly what the new project is about. Exact to the T. That last sentence you just said, to the T.
Tell us more about it. But before we talk a little bit more about it, you're deciding to release this in May. Why May? Why the date? Is that something significant, or is that truly just where it landed? Tell us more about the release date.
This has been the most spontaneous body of work I've done. I'm the type of artist to finish out an album, have it sit with me for about 4 to 5 months, plan out the release schedule, and be super confident with it. I was literally finishing up recording tracks for this project as recent as 2 weeks ago. It's nice because when I did the previous style, it was like, all right, I'd sit on that project, but I'd already, by the time the music would come out, to me, it would feel old because I'm like, well, I'm not in that space anymore, sonically, lyrically. I'm in a completely new place. This music still feels so fresh because of how spontaneous it is. So I kind of like that pattern. When it comes to the release date of May 3rd, it is frankly because this year, every single major artist decided to drop an album in Q1 and Q2 of 2024. So whatever original release date this was going to land on was going to be competing with this huge artist. And again, not that I would actually be in direct competition with the artist, but it's like from a streaming perspective, it's a nightmare. You're trying to take away or shine light on a simple project on a day where somebody is reinventing music possibly. And so I would rather release on a day where there's not as much going on to give my project a real chance to shine. And so it's been tough. May 3rd is still a date where I'm sure there's going to be other huge artists. In fact, I already know, I think Dua Lipa's album is coming out that day too. I'm going to stream it, but like, it's just where it landed. And frankly, I'm glad it landed there because I feel like now the music I submit today is finally in the state that it needs to be in order to be consumed how I want it to be consumed. I didn't want it to feel rushed, especially after so much work has gone into it. I think I'm very proud of where it's landing and how it's going to come out.
Yeah, well, I won't be streaming her shit that day. I'll wait till the 4th for you.
Thank you so much.
Let's talk about the album real quick. Artwork, let's start there. What's the artwork for that album? What's that process been like for you?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I am obsessed with building an era, and I wanted this to be an era for real. And that comes down to the album cover needs to be a big deal. And I don't know where the music industry got lost with that. I know it's slowly coming back with some of these artists, but I'm so sick of the trend of just like a blurry picture, slapping a parental advisory on it and calling it a day. Where is the actual intention? Because remember, maybe not everyone is looking at it this way, but to me, everything is marketing. You are selling your song and getting people to want to buy it. And me, I know that if I see good cover art, I'm going to go click to the song, just be like, okay, why? Like, is the cover art translating to the song quality? So the album is called Mind Altering Substance. And I finished out medical school while I was finishing up this album. And so I came at it from, I'm someone who's very interested in, I'm about to start my psychiatry residency in June. And so that's probably why initially in the conversation, it felt very therapy heavy. It's like my mind has always been there. But as part of the work I've been doing in between school and starting residency, it's a lot on working with patients with mind altering substances, psychedelic, things like that, that were not previously approved to treat mental health, but now are. And I love this idea that Kesha said so long ago, aptly in one sentence, your love is my drug, because love is a drug, like, and being in a relationship, taking what we just spoke about, somebody out there is able to love your tiniest flaws that in 25 years on earth, I still haven't been able to grapple with. He's able to take it on in a second. Why is that? What work do I have to do to make sure that I'm not projecting damage from past relationships onto this beautiful new thing that has the chance to blossom into something great, right? So that's what the album's about. And I wanted the album cover to reflect that. So I love this, the influence of like Alice in Wonderland, mushrooms. And so the album cover is essentially almost, it's me growing out of the ground with sun coming from one side and just almost like the juxtaposition between the death of my old self and the birth of my new self.
I think that the universe is just so beautiful and how it really does align us, because sometimes we don't know that we are in need of that alignment until it happens. And there's so much that I can just pull from everything you just said. So I won't do too much, but the first thing I'll say is therapy vibes. Holy shit, like I had no idea, but you didn't give me therapy vibes though. It was so organic. It was so nonchalant. It was very just natural. We need more therapists like that, okay? I'm so tired of the therapists that are very like too by the book. We have to take these experiences and truly humanize them. And I think that without even knowing that until just now, you have that.
you.
So,
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
of course. And then the second thing I want to mention is the artwork. Oh my gosh. So I love collecting old records. I am a big fan of specifically like jazz. I have a huge connection with like Liza Minnelli and Judy Garland. And Liza is someone who I actually grew up with when I was younger. So she was a big influence for me in my childhood. And so it's so funny that you say that, because when it comes to collecting records, it's the artwork. I don't even have to know the music, but the artwork is truly what, for me, and obviously being 34, coming from an era where you would go to a shop to get a CD, it's the artwork that captivates you. It's an experience. It's more than just the music. It truly is an experience. So I love to hear that you're trying to, revive that, because we do need that.
Yes, and actually, this is the first album that I confidently am looking into actually getting on vinyl, because I believe in the music, I believe in the project, and I love the artwork. We got an extensive number of photos, so it's going to be a whole moment with the front cover, the back cover, the artwork on the CD, a little booklet. Like, I'm very excited.
So now you've got me excited. I'm like, okay, like, is it May 30th? Like, come on. Let's talk about the tracks on it real quick. Is there a track on that album that you have a hard time not getting choked up over, or a song that it really does just take you back into that moment of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a ballad, right? It could be just any song. There are happy songs that are out that make me sad. Is there a track that you can think of, because it's such a personal record, it sounds like, but is there one that you can think of that truly just draws you back from everything going on?
Yes, there's a song on the second half of the project called Never Thought I'd Lose You. And it's interesting because this is an album about love, and it's about my first real relationship. So why would I be talking about loss in that sense? And I think what kind of happened during this time period is, while I was getting into this first serious relationship, cementing a better relationship with myself, I ended up losing, not to death or anything, but just like had a huge friendship breakup with one of my childhood best friends. And so I think it was just such a weird concept to me, because we had spent so much time growing up talking about what possible weddings and like what life would be like when we were in these big relationships. I never thought that she wouldn't be around to see me kind of harness that power and like foster a better relationship with myself. But it's one of those hard things that you realize growing up and becoming an adult, especially after 25, when your frontal lobe is finally like cemented. That's when you realize, okay, somebody that I thought was helping me and in my corner might actually, unfortunately, be somebody that's holding me back from being my best self. And that's such a hard realization, especially when you're getting into your first real relationship. I think that I was wondering, like, man, this must be like a huge red flag, because this girl has been in my life forever. He's just getting to know me. What does he think? And fortunately, he didn't think about it like that. But that song really addresses kind of feeling simultaneously so much love while going through so much loss.
I think you are truly on to something that, in my opinion, has lacked an artist recently: conveying the obvious message without being obvious.
Mm,
I've noticed that in a lot of music lately, where if you're writing a song about sex, the song is about sex.
right.
If you're writing a song or doing, performing a song about love, it's about love. I just had this thought not too long ago. I want to say maybe even 2 weeks ago, where I was thinking, man, like, what happened to music that could convey a message, but that was also open to interpretation, that was open
Mm.
to, it's not an obvious song, but it can be if you just look beyond it. Is there a song on this project that almost did not make the cut?
Yeah, okay. So the thing with this project, it's such a unique one, because there's 2 or 3 songs, like I said, that are like demos from back in 2019 that have been repurposed. And so I would almost go that way to be like, I don't know if this one should come out. I don't know if it's like old or if it's lost its touch. Like, I'm not sure. And I think like it's actually the song that it's about to get like my biggest video treatment. Like, so it's really turned around and like done like a 180 on what I was thinking about it, because every single time I'd sit there and I'd be like, I don't know about this, it might be dated, it might sound like it's trying too hard. Anybody that would just listen to it, people that were on the set of the video, would be like, okay, I'm leaving this set with the song stuck in my head, I can't not sing that chorus. And I was like, okay, we're on to something, maybe I should believe in this song more. So I'm really excited about the journey that song has had, for sure.
I love that. And so you said that video is already done, or you're getting ready to make that video?
I'm really glad you asked this. I have changed my relationship with videos. I know I keep saying that as an independent artist phrase, but it's so real. Uglies, my one biggest regret with that song was putting in that much work to craft a horizontal YouTube video for that song in the age of TikTok and Reels and vertical content when people are unfortunately lazy. Like, you're gonna go on your feed and you're gonna find a song you love. You're really telling me that for an artist you have no clue about, you're going to take the time out of your day to go watch their video on YouTube? There's no way. So the content needs to be ready in front of people to convince them to go listen to it, vertically ready to go. You press one button, you're on Spotify, you're on Apple Music, you can listen to it. So all of the videos that are coming out for this project are vertical. And the song that I'm talking to you about, all the videos are done, they've all been filmed. All of this video for the song that I just told you about, it's actually going to be released in 3 parts or 3 versions vertically on Instagram. I've never seen that done before. I might be missing an artist that's done it, but it's 3 videos to the same song, completely different set, completely different outfit, completely different choreo. But I feel like it's going to really help with pushing that song. And the theme for this project is longevity. I don't want to have a one hit that like sticks out. I would love to have several different hits. I want this album to have the Anti by Rihanna treatment, where that album came out in 2014 and I can still live off of it 10 years later and the music still sounds fresh.
You want to know what's even crazier? And I'm like, so now I'm also geeking for completely other reasons, because my partner and I, we were just having this conversation. Like, so he's such a music lover too. He has no social media presence. He is nowhere to be found. He is real though. And you know, I'm not making up my partner, I swear. Every night when we cook dinner, we are dancing, jamming the fuck out in our home. Like, music is truly how we connect. Our jam sessions in the car are very special moments with, you know, with my partner. And so he and I were just talking about this. We were just talking about music. It is what some people would consider a flopping era, but what people don't realize is that with a flopping era comes longevity. And it's funny you say Rihanna, you know, because we were just talking about artists who tried to dabble into more of a rock sound. Lady Gaga was one of them. One of her biggest flops was her wanting to do this rock-infused rock pop album, but look where it's at today. It's created some of the most iconic music on her catalog, you know? So hell yeah, I'm excited for this for you.
I agree. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I can't wait for you to hear the music and see the videos.
Do you have dates on when those will be released, or is that still?
Yes. So my second single, Limerence, is coming out on April 12th. That will come out with that video. May 3rd, when the album comes out, I'm also going to drop the title track's visual as well. And then there's 2 songs that have videos that are coming out post, again, like for longevity, to be able to say, all right, this era started March 1st, the album came out May 3rd, but we're still putting out videos and content for songs that are on the album afterwards, so people can go back and rediscover the album in new ways. And I've also left it open-ended to the way where making a vertical video is easy. It's not as much work as a horizontal video is. And I've got a great team behind me. And so if there's a song that people listen to on the project and they're like, this is getting a video, right? Or we need a visual for it, I'll make the visual happen. Like, if that's something that people are excited about, I would love to do that. So there's 5 confirmed music videos on this project for the 14-track album. I'm always down to make more depending on how people respond to certain songs.
Out of the 14 tracks, which one are you most excited to perform live?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I am most excited. That's such a good question. I feel like I'm most excited to perform the track that I was telling you about that's getting those 3 versions of the video. It's called My Problem. It came out all the way back. Like, I teased it back in 2019 on Instagram when I was just fumbling around on the piano. And then I recorded a rough vocal demo for it. It's just quintessential 2010 to 2012 pop music. So if you enjoyed like Flo Rida, like I think like a huge influence for that song is like your TGIF by Katy Perry, your Where Them Girls that Flo Rida, Nicki Minaj, like that era of music. If you like that, that song is going to be for you. And I felt like a good 2010s banger. Like, we don't really have music like that right now. And I would love to bring that back without making it sound dated. That is the biggest challenge.
Yes. Oh, I'm so fucking excited, because that era that you just mentioned, the 2010s, but you're absolutely right. I feel like we as listeners need to take some accountability that in that era, we have not carried that into the music. You know?
Oh yeah. Like, you sometimes see on Instagram or Twitter, like the screenshots of Billboard charts from 2012 or 2013, and it's shocking because it's hit after hit after hit occupying that top 10. And then when we look at the stuff today, it's like I can name maybe 2 or 3 of the songs, but then the other ones on there, I'm like, what's going on? You know? So that's what I'm saying. that era was so golden for me growing up that I would love to have a song or two on the project that replicates that.
You are truly probably the first artist that I have on here that I can feel the passion from every angle, from the artwork to the track list. It's truly one of the first experiences I'm having on the pod where I'm like, I can feel it. I can feel the passion. And I feel like that translation, I think it's going to be just fine.
Thank you so much. And thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak on all this. It's been so great and it's been like a lovely conversation. I really enjoyed my time.
No, same. Before we wrap it up, I want you to take this time to truly, like, if there's anything that we missed, anything that in regards to the album, to the music, to the sound, I want you to take this time to truly speak on something that maybe we haven't touched on.
I think that the album can very easily be seen as something that's for people that are in love or in relationships, and it's not, frankly. That's what inspired me, but I try to leave my music open-ended enough to where it might come across as a niche experience, but you might tie it to something completely different. The album can absolutely be interpreted as self-love, and there's a huge amount of that in there because, like we touched on earlier in the interview, in order to be able to communicate and be in a healthy relationship, you have to be able to provide for yourself first. You need to know what you're lacking in order to be able to know what to ask for. And that theme is very clearly addressed on an album where if I'm comparing mental health and talking about love being a drug, then you're going to see exactly what happens when you go through obsession, withdrawal, and realizing, was I able to provide what I was trying to buy for myself? And so that's what the album's about, with lots of cool, campy, fun moments, really nice earworm type hooks. And one thing I really want to touch on in regards to my problem, that visual I'm extremely excited for, is bring back the Illuminati. That's what made the 2010s pop music how much fun it was. And so the Illuminati is referenced pretty heavily in the video that I made for it. And I'm very excited for people to see that.
I cannot wait for this to come out. You have my attention. You have my support. I had a feeling the universe was talking to me the second I even saw your name, which, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, I have not said your name because I can't pronounce it. I'm not too sure.
Oh, so it's like catching a vibe. You get vibe and then off, like something of something. So vibe of.
Vibe of. Do you have a middle name?
I have no middle name, which is a very common theme in Indian households. We don't usually have middle names. Our first and last names are usually pretty long, and I'm grateful because doing those tests and stuff and those scantrons, my gosh, if I had to bubble in stuff for a middle name as well, I never would have started the exam.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to that in the sense of like ours is elongated, but it's because of how many we have. Like we hyphenate our shit. And so mine was always like super long too. So I totally get that. And thanks for not like pranking me because I don't know if you remember, but I made the joke with you online.
I remember. I've been thinking about that all morning. I was like, oh my goodness, yes, of course. April 1st, April Fool's Day. Of course, adjusting that. I'd be like, is it really going to happen? But it happened.
I know. And I was literally, I've been laughing about that since we talked because I'm like, are we really going to record on April Fool's? Like, is he not going to show up or is this going to be like someone catfishing me or something? I'm like, you're the real deal. I cannot wait. May 3rd. It's going to be such an awesome date.
Thank you so much.
And lastly, tell everyone where to stalk your life everywhere, music, platforms, all of it. Go for it.
Yes. So on Instagram, I am at VJ the Music Man. That's VJDA Music Man. On TikTok, I'm VJ the Music Man 98. And then I'm on all streaming platforms. That's Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes. If you don't have the money for those, it's on YouTube. And then Pandora, all you name it. The distribution is working. And so feel free to check out my work. This is my 4th album. But if you're anything like me and you're like a music nerd, I always love going back and listening to artists' albums leading up to the hype of their new one coming out. So feel free to check out my Retrograde trilogy. It is all fun, and I think that you would really like it.
Thank you so much for giving me your time and for being on here. And I cannot wait to see what the future holds for you.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, if you've made it this far, don't forget to follow the socials on the screen or in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. See you next week.